Hi, welcome to today's class. We're very excited to have Danielle Barker from Flow Caravan Salon with us today. Hello, Danielle.
Hello, thank you for having me here.
Cool, yeah, we're very excited. A lot of her work, I guess, is based around natural hair and natural movement. So I know a couple of months ago, we met up with Daniela again and we showed her our new scissor. So today we're going to be focusing a little bit around obviously using curls and using the ANACONDA scissor. I've pretty much given this scissor to Daniela and said, just do you with it. Your thoughts on it?
Oh, loved it. I mean, straight away, I guess you have to start to change ways that you use things because you showed me a few of those techniques. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe I could adapt that, I'll try it. And then I had a few curly haircut clients come in and I'd just pick it up for a few areas of the haircut just to sort of dip my toes in to see what the effects of it were. And then I got quite confident with it and then was able to use it in the way that I would usually use a combination of two of my scissors. And now I just feel like I use that only for my curly haircuts.
So we will go into a little bit of the technical aspects of the ANACONDA a little bit later, but first off, I mean, most importantly, we sort of want to see what you're going to do today with your lovely model Sage and where that's all going to go with this haircut.
Yeah, sure. So yes, it's going to be a curly haircut today. And when I cut curly hair, I usually dry cut the curls, depending on what their hair curl texture is, whether it's quite curly, so anything sort of from medium curl to super curl will definitely be cut dry. But then there'll be times where I do wet cut curls as well, so it's using a combination. And today's haircut, I have an idea in mind, an inspiration for where we want the haircut to go, but I haven't actually cut Sage's hair before. So how we get there is always a journey. So I am going to treat this as I would a client in my salon. So the idea is that it's going to be a shag haircut and, you know, with a short kind of fringe and 70s kind of volume in there. So today came from the idea of her punk rock kind of vibe mixed with my love for the 70s and also her love for the 70s. So I'm hoping that we're going to get like Stevie Nicks mixed with the Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of finish in the end.
Were you born in the 70s by any chance?
No, not
just me.
The 70s.
Just me.
But I love the 70s. My heart is in the 70s. What I show is not specifically the haircut, but more the techniques within the haircut that you guys will be able to adapt in your own cutting on the floor. Within a salon environment too. And again, not specifically to curly hair. It can be hair that wants to have a little bit more movement in it. And this kind of haircut will encourage that too. When I'm cutting, I use things like their bone structure, the hair texture to dictate maybe how I might go about it. But a lot of it does evolve organically too. So yeah, that's where I would always, when I can, ask my client if I know they have curly hair to come on their best curl day. So hair being free from hats or hair ties, minimal product as well, but in a way that the hair is sitting naturally. And that might be usually around day 2.
Yeah, best hair curl
day, I love it. Yeah, the best.
Just be at the beach and then 3 days later.
Yeah, come like that. Because that tells me how they like their curls to sit when they're at their best.
Okay, so I'm going to leave you to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so this is the before. So as you can see, well, Sage's hair was cut about 2 months ago, she said, but only very minimally. And now I just feel like it's really grown out of shape. And sorry, I'm going to keep spinning you around. I just wanted to get a nice little visual of what that haircut looks like beforehand and where we're going to go with it. We're going to break the haircut up into 3 areas, but I'm not going to pre-map those out with sectioning clips and really clean cut lines. Because I'm working with the curl in its natural organic texture, I'm trying to disrupt it as little as possible. So I'm just going to use my fingers to isolate the area, and it's going to be a little bit messy, but again, when you're working with curly hair, you kind of just need to disrupt it as little as possible so that we're working with it in its most natural and settled state. Yeah, if you really wanted to create some sort of structure to this section, you
For
could.
people with OCD.
Yeah, you know, like if it just feels way too messy and unnatural, then you could draw in a zigzag line to separate that area. It just means that when those curls sit back on top of these ones, there's no predetermined lines at all. It's just going to, they jagger within.
You're not disrupting any of the movement. I don't know,
Yeah.
I always I'm a bit of a planner, so it's really good to see when it's in natural. Like, you've got natural hair with natural movement, so you wouldn't want to do a natural, perfectly straight sections through it all, and it means then that, I guess you're working more fluently.
More fluidly. It's more about the technique and I guess where you're placing it on the head in reference to the actual bone structure of the head, which is my main sort of mapping guide. That part never really changes on, I guess, whatever technique I'm using or how I'm doing it. When I'm mapping out my haircut, I'm using the bone structure. So for this nape area section, I'm finding the occipital bone and I'm just running that ridge of that section around through there. Where I'm going to begin this section and how I'm going to determine what my guide is based on the reference of the head shape, the hair that I'm working with as well. If you could almost visualize that this nape area is broken up into like 3 kind of mini subsections in there. So as I'm picking up the curls, you'll see that through this vertical area, my initial vertical section, I'm going to pick it up 3 times, but from 3 different areas of that vertical section. So the first section being the top of the center of the occipital bone, and how I'm going to reference where I want my guide point to be is roughly just at the top of the head here. So when I go in, I'm cutting the curls in a vertical sectioning pattern to create more air and movement within the haircut as opposed to cutting horizontally. It's just a way that I feel that it gets that movement happening. So when we go in to take that first cut, as you can see now when the hair drops, it's sitting soft and with air in between it. So it's starting to texturize the hair but maintain a solidness towards the ends as well, which is really what curly hair needs to be able to curl back in on itself. And with these scissors, they're a combination of a slicing and a blunt and a combination of the two, so that when that hair comes off, you're putting in a little bit of texture, but it's solid again. So I guess the technique or the idea of it that we're cutting each individual curl in a special way so that each individual hair within that curl sort of clumps together again at the end.
Yeah.
So when it falls.
I think like from the first section you cut there, if you have a look, especially with what the scissor is doing, the fact that it's actually cut and then pushed, you can really see how you're getting that sort of texture and movement straight off on the pieces on the ground. So obviously the reverse of that's going to be on the ends of the hair.
Yeah. So that's my first section and guide. And I'm just going to look to see if maybe I feel like I could go a little bit shorter. And I think that I can, just in reference again to what we're working with here. This is really where it's starting to build that shape up. So if we don't go short enough through here, then I feel like you're not going to really get to see the vibe. And so that's bounced that up straight away. Now, again, just probably for the purpose of working in a way that you can see what I'm cutting as I'm cutting it, I might just clip that curl up and out of the way as we're working further down through the section. So then you can see. So when that hair is here, now you can see my next one that I'm cutting, I'm going to go slightly longer than that to then start to filter that reverse graduation as it's coming down. And then we end up with basically the length line, which I said that we weren't going to touch because we want to try to elongate that length. But then when the curls fall, they're falling defined and starting to create that layer. By elevating the hair in a very vertical position and pushing the scissor on that angle, it's really creating that movement straight away. Whatever comb you use with curly hair, I always just use the really wide teeth of the comb. So sometimes I've got this giant one here. It's just, again, so that I'm not disrupting the movement of the curl too much. Yeah. And if I do, and when I do, I guess I can just mist it back down with water or one of my styling products to rehydrate that curl and let it come back into its motion again. So I'm going to just now work through the haircut, follow that same kind of guide, roughly loosely pick up the previous curl, but it's more based on the feel. So I use the tip of the scissor to take that first kind of section as well, and that isolates the area in a nice, neat way without disrupting it again as well. What I really have tried to do with this education session is to put that structure to something that just really happens quite visually as you're reading the curls. And as I'm coming back around, I'm just over-directing it slightly back to the centre as well. But the main thing, I guess, if you can take anything away from this today, is more the technique and what can be created with the scissor itself without having to, it truly is effortless compared to what I used to be doing to create this. I would, sort of carve up the hair a lot more and then end up getting more texture than I needed, or it would be too blunt, and just kind of stumped it off. Whereas this way I really am getting that combination of texture and curl happening through there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes if you use a straight up slicing scissor for this as well, it can almost be too wispy. So the fact you can get that activation right at the start where it chops and then blends out from there probably makes the ends of it, like, especially with curls, you don't want it wispy. You need it to be blocky enough and also soft enough. So
I guess now you can see the shape when you pull it out. It really does have that shorter to long reverse graduation effect through the ends, as opposed to before when we pulled it out, it was the opposite, which is always what I'm trying to create when I'm cutting curly hair. They tend to come and it's quite heavy on, heavy triangular shapes where it's, bottom heavy. But I'm always trying to reverse that so that it's the other way. So then once I feel quite happy with the amount of kind of weight that's left through the bottom, the shortness of the curls internally and where the haircut is going, then I'm happy to move on to the next section, which is going to sit completely isolated from this previous one. So there's no connection to the layers at all, and that's what's going to create the shag haircut of what we're going for. Yeah. So this next area is more like an internal middle section that I'm going to work through, and how I'm going to map that out is basically find the parietal ridge of the scalp, the head shape, and how I do that is just by getting my comb. I just visually, find that parietal ridge area, and then I run my hands through to create that separation of the section, and then just loosely isolate that through here. So now to identify where I want my next section to begin, I'm going to take a little bit of a channel guide through that parietal ridge area, and then I'm going to lift each curl up slightly longer than the previous, as I did through the NAPE section, to again create that reverse graduated effect through the external shape. And as you can see, it's probably where the more majority of the hair is going to come up to really create that shape. So I guess the perfect part about when we're cutting the hair on the vertical, as I have been, is that we're creating the expansion of the curl from underneath the hair. And I guess that's when you're cutting curly hair, what you want to consider all the time. Where do you want that expansion to be? And in this case, yes, we want it to happen from underneath, especially through here, to bounce up that air and create that movement and layered effect through the top without it being structurally layered. It's more of a loose kind of shaggy layer. Depending on the texture of the hair and the texture that you want to create will determine how thick your sections are that you take. So the thicker the section or the thicker the curl that you pick up, then the chunkier the texture and the result is going to be. If you want it to be finer and a more blended texture, then you'll take smaller curls and sections to pick up and cut.
I think maybe at this point while you're cutting through there, I can probably talk a little bit about the technical aspects of this scissor.
Yes.
So with it, you will notice it's got an offset handle, which is fairly anamorphic as well. It's got a really nice bend and comfortable on the hand, so you can manipulate it really, really easily, which is really, really important for this. It has like a 70-30 mountain blade. So on each side, it has a ridge running down. And what it does is it gives it a lot of power in the base. It's quite a broad leafed blade, but this is where it gets a little bit kooky. So the two bases blades here, they have a 45-degree edge on them. So a 45-degree edge is something you put on a point cutting scissor. Then on the end of this blade here, you'll notice quite weirdly, I can just run my hand along it because that has actually been blunted off. So it's not sharp at all. It's like a 90-degree edge on it, so you can run it. However, this side, it has a 30-degree edge, so it's like a slicing scissor. And you can almost see the point when you hold it here. There's a little ridge, that's where it starts. So 45 degrees all the way to this point here, and then 90 and 30. So you have two completely opposed edges coming together. So the premise and the theory behind this is as it cuts, it gets to this point, and then it starts slicing on one side and pushing the hair on the other. So naturally, it almost creates a bit of a turn or a twist in the hair. So it gives it that full arc when you're using it. What it allows you to do for cutting is rather than trying to come in and slice the hair, you can come in and cut the hair and then it'll create the slice for you. So it means you're not going to create any frizz in it. A lot of the time I know people might use a razor on curly hair, which personally, I understand if you want to diffuse it, but I've never been a massive fan purely on the fact that if you can frizz it out. I feel like without having to move it through the hair, you can cut it, and so you get a lot cleaner result on it by doing that.
Oh, 100%. I am a razor absolute fan and lover of the razor, and it really shatters me. I mean, I think you definitely can. Yeah. You can do anything. Yeah. you want to do. You just got to, find your way to do it. But I feel like what these scissors have created is like how I would technically cut with my razor, the sections that I would take, how I would map the section out, the effect them having on the hair is now translated straight into a scissor cut version. So I can get that crispness that I need for my curls, but the shape that I would have otherwise created using my razor.
Cool.
I love it.
Like the best of both worlds, who would have thought?
Exactly.
Go us.
Basically, through this internal midsection, I'm working little vertical panels, started from the guide at the top, and then I'm just scooping up the curls slightly below in that section to then take them each slightly longer as they're elevated and then snip them off. And that's creating that reverse layered piece in that area that's sitting disconnected and on top of the previous section. So you're getting all of that air and movement and layering in the hair without shattering the texture and still being able to really read those curls as they so truly are sitting in the hair. And again, this technique can be used and adapted in so many different ways. Using the bone structure though, that's my point where I'm like, okay, once I'm hitting that occipital bone, I know that that's starting the next section. So you're not sort of, if you wanted to do this on a much, much longer version of hair that wasn't as curly, you know, and not be afraid to cut your previous section, you're still in tune with the bone structure of the head and working with where the hair's coming out from it naturally so that you don't overlap in your sections. If you really wanted to push it quite creatively, you could really take this anywhere you want, which is why essentially I'm doing a haircut, but I'm showing you mainly techniques that you can manipulate and use in any which way you want to. I have definitely used this elevated technique to cut hair that is not curly, so straight hair, and it creates that internal movement through the hair. Again, using those scissors, I would have to do a lot more work to take the weight out as I'm going up the hair strands and creating that texture at the same time. But this is just giving me a little bit more structure to the bottoms of it. So it's just indenting it more intentionally. So I probably, again, and this is where I was thinking, I have an inspiration. It's going to be a short shag, not mullet so much, but more shaggy with that short fringe kind of and layered texture and maintain the length. And yeah, in my mind, I was thinking it was going to be shorter, but as I'm going through, I'm not feeling like I want to take it that much shorter. I'm enjoying having those elongated pieces because I feel like when she gets her hands in it and once that fringe is in there, it's really going to offset against the length that's been left behind. Because everything is elevated and cut visually with a semi-structure, what we're doing to check the balance is just using our hands to go through there and just ridge it out to see that there's enough balance. Now I'm going to move on to the fringe area. This is my third and final section. So what we're left with here is the fringe as an extended section that kind of reaches to just over the crown. And I feel like to really make this fringe pop, I'm also going to bring in the sides of the haircut to kind of really offset. And again, this is where the haircut has just evolved naturally. And I've decided that rather than just cutting this as part of that haircut, I've left intentionally more length throughout the back, and I want to take more length from the front to really make that pop against each other. So I am just drawing a slight line to just the top of the ear so that we've got that extended fringe into the sides of the face area happening through here. And so this is where sometimes too I could approach the curly hair dry cutting method in a different way and just mist it slightly with water so that then I'm creating a little bit more bounce, because where the hair is sort of through this fringe area, there's not a lot of curl in here, so I can wet it down to actually create more curl, go shorter in there and yeah, do it in that way. So that's what I'm going to do. So as I have been all the way through, I'm going to continue to take my little vertical sections, and I am going to use the comb, like I said, because I'm working with the hair in a little bit more of a wet state now. And different to the elevating techniques that I've been doing throughout, still vertical, but at natural fall with the scissors. So now we're creating the texture to be a lot more solid through that through that perimeter line because we're cutting from the top of the hair. So we're creating that expansion actually from the top rather than lifting and coming from the underneath like we have through the rest of the haircut. So I'm going to cut my little guide, and I am working with less than a centimetre kind of sections throughout. Now, as I bring it forward, I'm going to just bring that section slightly back to the previous, and I'm going to pinch it. And so by pinching the hair, it's cinching everything in that area to the center so that then when I cut it, it's going to spring back. So then when it disperses, it kind of has this loose texture around it with still a structured point. So I'm going to continue just taking this, over directing them back to the center and just creating that little curve on the beveled edge. The other thing is by cutting on top of the hair, we're again creating that little reverse graduated area through the ends so that it's going to encourage the hair to actually flick around the face. Just bringing more of that 70s vibe to the haircut. Just continuing to mist it as well so that we're not creating fluff. The hair can then be combed, be cut, and then fall back into its little curl state. So this is where I'm looking with Sage's face shape to decide, do I want to keep that little bit of length through the jawline, or do I want to eliminate it to really disconnect from the length at the back? And I'm feeling like it looks cute, but maybe a little bit heavy through the frame. So maybe I could just pick that up to really bring more attention to the cheekbones. How do you feel about that? Yes. So again, just over directing the hair to the front so that when it pushes back, it just disperses. Oh yeah, that looks really cute. I feel like the difference between a shag and a mullet is that the shag haircut tends to still have hair that goes and connects into the back that goes over the ear, whereas once you sort of lift that to above the ear, that's when it starts to look more mullet. So yeah, I feel like we can definitely take that to here and not feel like we're pushing into the mullet. It's still staying as a shag.
I love the more visual aspect of this, how you can look at it and then come in and literally bang, pop, you see it. And then you can, obviously like you've just done there, where you've decided I'm going to slightly change that shape up, and how visually instant it is and satisfying.
Yeah, yeah. I contemplated doing this haircut starting with the fringe section, which is, again, sometimes how I might approach a haircut in the salon, where, yeah, I actually start with the fringe because it's more the feature, but then I also felt like connecting it to the back would be harder to explain where I'm picking my sections up. So it was just coming back to that method to the madness and trying to create this for education purposes that people will be able to follow and understand where I'm picking the sections up from and how I'm cutting them. Feeling like definitely a lot more of my clients are coming in and wanting to embrace that natural texture and movement within the hair. Fringes is a lot of work that I'm doing at the moment as well. My inspirations are always Bridget Bardot, Stevie Nicks, any of these.
Can I ask something completely unrelated to the fringe?
Sure.
But tell me about how Flow Caravan came about, because I love it. I'm a bit of a caravan obsessed at the minute because I bought one and then I happened to see your Insta pop up and I'm just like, that is so goddamn cool.
So it actually was initially, we had gone on a little family road trip and we were like, oh, we should do this more often. Let's get a caravan. And I've never been the camping type. So I was like, well, if it's going to be a caravan, it has to be something that I can, you know, put our spin on and, you know, we'll get like a 70s one and, you know, because I love the 70s. And, you know, we'll make it really cool on the inside.
And tax write off, yeah? No,
that's true.
Well, that was my one. Anyway.
No, this was just totally for holiday purposes. So then we started, you know, pulling it apart and, so what I'm doing through here is I'm actually now creating more of an indentation into the curls and I'm trying to compact the curls into clumps. So in this sense, what I'm doing is just reading where the curl is because I'm feeling like there's always one side of the hair that's got more hair than the other and this is the side for me right now. And I'm feeling like, it's just looking a little bit too heavy, a little bit too clumpy. So as I'm going through, I'm just cutting on the internal of the curl so that it's just pushing little indentations.
Will that pronounce it out a little bit more as well by taking the bulk out of it and then flicking? Yeah.
Yes.
You really see that starting to develop.
When you see that kind of happening, it's because we've gone in, we've created that little indentation in the right spot. I just need to check balance. Sorry, so back to Flow Caravan. We ended up then just kind of, I had posted it on my Instagram story and then someone, you know, like, we bought a caravan and then someone goes, oh, salon, ? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Sort of, you know, at that point where we've got a small family now, we've got I had another, you know, my second daughter on the way. So it was like harder and harder to think about going back to work and what capacity that was going to look like. We've moved into the hills, so, you know, we're a bit further away. And yeah, I then just started thinking of it in that way. I was like, oh, that's actually a good idea. What would I do? You know, and it just kind of came from there then. And everything else, I guess, my husband was locked down, so we had no parties, nowhere to go, nothing to do. He was just, you know, still able to work, lucky for him. But, you know, I guess not having any friends over on the weekends meant that
you got shit done.
Yeah, shit got done, exactly. And yeah, it did get done. And he just, chipped away at it, did it all by himself. It's pretty amazing, really. So I'm now continuing to keep those pinch curl cutting areas still at that natural fall so that I can just strengthen up the structured line rather than loosen it too much. I think a little bit bulkier is cute too. But again, it's just still that same technique where we're just bringing it vertical forward and going in there with our little slide cut. So I'm just continuing to work through these top areas using just the horizontal panels. And now that I've created, I guess, the weight in the fringe line that I want, I'm going to start to elevate my sections now to loosen and lighten up the layers and texture that sit on top. Because if I continue to pull it down at 0 degrees, it's going to keep that too heavy for my liking of this haircut. I'm feeling like I want to lift it because I want to alleviate the weight. It's kind of the same concept as when you're layering the hair, and you know, lift it up at 90 degrees from the head to get your layer. I'm lifting the curl 90 degrees from the head and getting that layer to connect the fringe. And again, just another dry cutting technique. By misting that hair down, because I'm needing to use my comb, because there's not a lot of curl in the hair, there will be more curl once I cut into it. Now might be a good time to show that, you know how you were talking about that piece of fabric?
Yeah.
I just feel like that's exactly what's happening to the hair through here. I'm holding it vertically and going in on that.
And almost on a diagonal.
Yeah.
Which we always have when we talk about hair being like a fabric. And so when you look at fabric, when it's woven and put together, like there's not a lot of movement when you do it on a horizontal or a vertical. But once you start coming in diagonally to things, you can have a look at how much more movement you get out of a fabric, and just hair is fabric, as you know, so you can see you get a lot more movement when you're coming in diagonally. So you're picking something up vertically and cutting into it. That's how you get a whole lot of that shape developing through your haircut. And once again, it's just respecting the fabric that you're working with. I mean, you've got curls there that you're never going to, like, I guess, jumble them up and stuff like that. So respect that fabric, but also understand what that fabric is going to do. So by coming in with a diagonal, you really get way more movement through it all. I think as a visual, this is something that's really, really nice way to understand how you move it and when you cut and when you want to create movement in it.
Yeah,
Makes sense?
I love that.
Yeah.
So just kind of creating a little bit more of that sort of curve, cutting, channeling, indentation through that section again, because it was just sitting a little bit heavy. And I'm able to do this as the hair is kind of drying into its natural phase and just really following the crevices of the curl to indent that. So as I'm now approaching the top of the actual head, so from here, I'll do this final section from the front, and then I'll move and do the top crown area from the back. Yeah, so just kind of moving around the head, creating more comfortable angles. So the elevation that you lift the hair to from the head depends on the hair texture and density as well. So basically the, I guess, thicker the hair, the more over-directed I would go to cut it, because it would start to create shorter lengths within the hair as it falls down. So you're going to get a little bit more of I guess, a textured, looser, edged finish. But the finer the hair, the less I would project, so that it creates more structure and it's a shorter snip as opposed to a longer one, which is creating more texture and looseness through the hair, or, you know, shorter and sharper will sort of bulk it back up more quickly. I'm just pivoting around the crown, lifting my curls, cutting them. These areas are a little bit thicker, so I am just over-directing them a little bit more to create a little bit sort of more shorter lengths within it and that looseness onto the edging. Working circular sections around the head is a really nice way to cut curly hair too, because it just means that it spirals and falls quite naturally with the shape of the head. I'm going to go through now and just pick up sort of at random as I'm going through to just create any more little indentations of texture as I might feel that they need to be there. But I'm quite liking the shape, the texture, the thickness. So I'm just taking a moment now. I've gone through the steps in my head that I have outlaid for you today with this haircut. And now this is where I'm just going to look at the visual shape to see if and where I want to push it into another direction. And I'm feeling like maybe just bringing some of this width. Even though I want it to have that 70s volume, I'm still feeling like it's a little bit heavy. Where are we? There's the mirror. Just through here. So I feel like I could just sharpen up the look just by working a little bit more through the sides, over the ears, and creating a little bit more connection between the front frame and the back. So I'm just going to go through, just snip.
That's a really good one to actually see how that scissor works there with that full sort of cat push mentality.
Yes. So just holding it and just letting the scissor actually do the work to connect through.
It's almost like cheating, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I'm loving how I'm sort of ending my snip but leaving those little bits, I think, to connect with the length is cool too. It goes with that little rock chick vibe, but it picks up. It squares in that width that I was talking about to connect the shape. Yeah, I love that we can see the difference between the two here.
Yeah.
And just what that has done for the shape.
That's huge, actually.
It's just made it just more rock, a bit more modern. Yeah, brought that edge to the cut. Cool. weight out of these bits for me. Going in and allowing that natural curl texture to bounce within my fingers so that I can create those little curve sections within it to debulk. Hair just through these little areas and create those little indentations of texture. Yeah, let the hair bounce and then create those little indentations. So now that I'm happy with the haircut, I'm going to pop the scissors down and I am going to pop some product in there, diffuse it a little bit to give it some lift and redefine some of those curls. So here is the finished look of Sage's Stevie Nicks mixed with the Rocky Horror Show kind of event. And yeah, we've gone in that nice short shaggy fringe and maintaining that 70s volume, so I think we stayed true to the initial
brief of it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Detoured a little bit along the way, but yeah, we brought it out and I think it really suits her too.
I love the look and I think it looks great, and it's all like achieved from one scissor, which I love the aspect of this, that you can, you just need the right tool for the right look each time. So if you're trying this at home, make sure that you tag Flow Caravan into it and Excellent Edges. You can subscribe to our channel, like this video and click the bell icon. That means you'll be getting notifications every time we drop a new education video. And thanks so much to Daniela for coming in today. We really, really appreciate it. And look out for some education classes coming up this way with Daniela in it and highlighting curly hair.
Love it.
Yay.
See you soon.